want to inspire other bond members to, try martial arts, to get into the martial arts
For
as a form
sure.
of exercise and self-defense, and another way to experience, the bond lifestyle, since it's
Yeah.
an integral part.
Yeah, I think that that's awesome. I think that you're one of the best people to kind of bring everybody together to do that for sure.
I don't know about that, but it's an endeavor nonetheless. So, okay, so let's start. So we're here. Everybody, thanks for coming to another interview for Always Say Yes to Adventure. And this is another interview for inspiring people to get into martial arts and to have martial arts as part of the Bond experience. Oh, I shouldn't say that. That's a copyright. That's another show.
As
Sorry,
part of the
Dave.
Bond vibe, I don't know, lifestyle. That's
The
that's
Bond
another one. I don't
lifestyle,
know.
the Bond community, the Bond,
They're all
yeah,
taken up. They're all taken up.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, but you have your own Instagram account that is pretty much devoted to fighting and martial arts and all that. So why don't you, introduce
Yeah.
yourself?
So I'm Blake. My Instagram is Bond Life Chicago. I focused that on initially kind of started out being the whole, everything that kind of encompasses Bond, the clothes, the lifestyle, things like that. And then because I just like you, and we're gonna have a really fun conversation tonight. We both have a strong passion for martial arts. I felt that it would be fun to start doing what I call double O fight breakdowns of the fight scenes within the Bond series. And so that's kind of what I've really been focusing on lately is kind of breaking down some of the martial arts that Bond uses in the movies, as well as just the other fighting techniques and kind of how he's able to beat all these different villains of all different sizes and strengths.
So before we get into your martial art background, how did you come about upon this double O fight breakdown? What made you think of it? And also, how do you do it? Like, what's your process of doing these breakdowns?
So what made me want to do it is, everybody's kind of got their own awesome little niche to kind of make us all a little bit different. Otherwise, we're just posting, today especially was everybody's just posting pictures of Aaron Taylor Johnson in a tuxedo. And it's like, how could I differentiate myself slightly from everybody so that it's not just another page,
Sweater
but it's
video?
exactly, but it's me doing something that I also enjoy. So it's not only is it Bond, which I enjoy, but it's also martial arts, which I enjoy, bringing kind of both of those passions together. And that's kind of where I was like, you know what? I'm going to try this once and see how it goes. I didn't expect to continue to do it. I just, let's see where this goes. And I got a lot of really awesome feedback from a lot of people. And I was like, I'm going to keep doing them until I can't do them anymore. And once I run out of Bond ones, then maybe I'll move on to, other action series from there. As far as my process, I don't know how official or technical of a process that it is. I kind of just come up with one or two scenes that I want to do, and I kind of just start kind of watching them a couple times throughout like a week or two maybe, and then from there, after that week, on a day that I'm off work, because usually on my work days it's a little bit too hectic to try to film it then, and I'll sit down and basically, almost like a coach watching film, kind of play by play, write out a little bit of what it is, because although I've watched it several times, it's still sometimes jarbled up in my head a little bit. And then that list kind of is like my last little study guide. And then from there, I kind of talk through it once with myself off the list, and then once I feel like I have it, I film it from there. And then, and we've talked about this before as well, I'm not the best at film editing, so I kind of just go with the flow. If I slip up a tiny bit, it's me. I'm not trying to win any Oscars or anything like that, so it's what you get. I'm trying to go into the martial arts and the fighting aspect more than I am the filmography of it, but I hope everybody enjoys them and gets a little bit out of them.
So what are you looking for when you look at these things? What are you looking at specifically? Like
If I
what's capturing your attention?
So if I can pick out a specific martial arts, and you've helped me a lot with some of these standing up ones, because as we'll get into later, my ultimate specialty is not so much stand up game or striking as it is as yours is. Um, but I'll try to pick out a specific type of martial art that he's using in that fight, or what maybe the attacker is using, and then kind of go from there. And if there is some more technical moves versus just the big film movie haymakers and things like that, I'll try to kind of break those down, show where maybe this is a little bit more realistic. Maybe this is just a little bit more to make it look like a cool, choreographed fight, and kind of go from there.
It's listen, I've been enjoying them because I've been studying
Thank you.
martial art my whole life since I was like 12. I've
Right,
done about four or five. I've dabbled in other martial arts, meaning like when I did judo as a kid, I did it for a summer. I did a year
right,
of Shotokan in college. I did a year of Taekwondo as a kid.
right,
I even did, but I did about four or 5 years of fencing and saber fencing on the college fencing team. But and then also when I got into my kung fu training, I looked and studied and watched a lot of other martial arts, especially in the
right.
Chinese martial arts, particularly. Um, so I wanted to, be very familiar with all the different martial arts I could, even though I'm really, if I could say, I'm really only focused in Tiger Claw.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, so for me, listening to your fight breakdowns, it was a real pleasure, and I really loved it, and and it, you know, awakened a lot of the passion of the martial arts for myself. So let me ask you this: you're doing martial arts now. How did
Yes.
you start? What was your first? Where did it begin for you in terms of martial arts?
So our journeys are a little bit different. Like you just said, you've done it almost your whole lifetime. I've had an interest in it probably growing up my whole life, but I was playing baseball and basketball, and I never really had time to get into, my parents were okay with me doing those sports and having practice year round for those, staying out of trouble that way versus, having the time
Getting
to
into
get
trouble with
into.
martial arts.
Right, exactly, exactly. So I always kind of had a passion for it, but I never really got into it as a kid. Um, Now, go into my young adult life. I have also always wanted to be a police officer, and I got hired as a police officer, which there's a little bit of control tactics and defense tactics in that, but that has a really wonky work schedule. And initially, one of the first department that I worked at, the control tactics instructor trained, and he had just gotten his black belt in jujitsu. And that's also around the same time that the UFC got super big, super popular. So jujitsu gyms were starting to pop up all over the place, just like, karate and taekwondo gyms were when I was initially growing up. And or dojos, I guess I should say, not so much as far as gyms. But that kind of got me into, this really works for law enforcement versus some of the striking or taekwondo and things like that of that nature. And I always wanted to get into then the jujitsu side of things. Ultimately, I was able to find a place that was close to me, had a really flexible schedule, so I was able to start training. I've been training now full time for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for a little bit over 4 years, and
Wow,
and
cool.
as we've said before, I love it. That is like my all time passion outside of my family and work and bond is, number four on that list is Jiu Jitsu. Um,
Do you have what belt have you achieved so far or
I am currently a blue belt.
Mhm.
I am about so in jujitsu, you earn a stripe for every amount of hours trained with that specific belt rank. I am about a little bit under 30 hours away from earning my third stripe with my blue belt, which is 100 hours per stripe. And then once I have my fourth stripe with the blue belt, then I can start testing for my purple belt. So I'm blue is, the way I understand it, is still considered to be a little bit more of a beginners because it's white then blue. But ultimately, once you obtain blue, you're not really learning anything new. You're just learning how to perfect it and kind of just the reps and learning it over and over and just getting better and better at it until you achieve that, the upper ranks, the brown, the black belt, and from there.
Mm. Are there tournaments? Are you involved, or have you done tournament or?
I have not. I am a competitive person, but because of my work in law enforcement, I don't want to personally. I don't want to risk going into a tournament and blowing out a leg or something serious where then I'm not able to work.
Mm.
Um, I do know so, and that's another thing too. My gym specifically wasn't very focused on pushing people to compete. There are some gyms specifically for like jujitsu and kickboxing, mixed martial arts stuff that they're very heavy, at least in my area, on wanting people to do tournaments, doing fights and things like that. And again, the thing I'd say with that is you got to find a gym that fits the needs that you're striving for.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I always tell people when you're getting into martial art, first find a place that's convenient. If
Yes.
you can get to it, you're going to get to it. If it's a
Yes.
struggle to get to it, you're going to find an excuse not to get to it. So that's like
Yes,
the
exactly.
most important thing. Second, find a teacher that you click with, that makes
Yes.
sense to you. And third, make sure that the martial art fits you.
Yep.
You know, it's like trying on a suit. I tried several martial arts and they weren't a good fit. And until I found Tiger Claw, I was like, this was, a little itchy here and this is a little weird. And Wing Chun
Right.
has a weird stance and, there's all these kind of other factors. Jiu-jitsu, although I think it is a brilliant martial art, it is probably one of the most practical. And I'm going to ask you about that in a minute.
Yep.
It is probably one of the most street practical as well. I don't want to hug a guy for half an hour.
You definitely have to get used to that.
I
And
have a bit of
several
a
other
germophobia
situations.
thing.
Yes, you definitely have, there are certain positions
I
where
like keeping
even,
my distance.
yep, the name escapes me, but there is a specific arm bar where you like bend your leg over the person's face and like hook your foot here and it's like I
Yeah,
don't want to have to practice that one more than once or twice. Like
yeah.
I
There's
trust you.
definitely some holds that are very intimate.
Yes, that's for sure.
So let me ask you, how is this? So has this helped you as being a police officer? Does it translate at all? Have you
It
used
does.
it?
So I have several times, not to the extent of having to like full on roll or fight with somebody on the ground with my jujitsu, but once you get a good, you know, mastery of how to manipulate shoulders, elbows, wrists, and things like that, and ultimately to win the battle in law enforcement, I want both arms behind your back like that so that I can handcuff you.
Mhm.
And whether your arms up here, here to the side, or you just want to fight, once you know how to do a Kimura or an Americana or a wrist locks, you have a really good idea of how to manipulate that person, even if you're standing up, to get a little bit of pain compliance. Once they ease up, you don't have to keep the pain on, and you get that control of that person. So that's where it's really come in handy quite a bit, as well as just kind of the confidence and the comfort level of knowing what other tools I have in my back pocket if lo and behold this struggle does go to the ground, or what I might have to do if it does begin to escalate. So I've even since starting to train, I've stopped carrying a taser because I've felt that, and it's a good tool. I'm not saying it's not a good tool, but I've felt that I have the confidence in myself to go hands on with somebody and try to subdue them or keep control of them if need be, versus having to tase them just because they are being a what we call in launch like an active resistor. So they're not necessarily fighting, but at the same time they're keep just refusing to be controlled or arrested. And that's something where you could potentially be justified in tasing that person to subdue them. Whereas I would prefer, and I have confidence in myself that 99% of people I should be able to control well enough to control them in a safe manner without having to then tase them as well.
Wow. So, um, has any of your fellow officers saying like, "Hey, how come you're not having a taser?" Or is it
Uh,
any pushback from that? Or
every once in a while, I mean, that's one thing about so cops. We're all pretty much. It's like we're in a high school drama constantly. So we'll all give each other, you know, we'll give each other a hard time about certain things. So every once in a while, people will say comments just about whatever. But at the same time, it is as long as your policy, as long as you're up on the policy and you're following those rules that are laid out by the policy. So I do have, so ours is you're required to have one less lethal. I could have either a taser, pepper spray, or a baton, which ultimately, if you get into law enforcement, you learn that most of the time the baton's not used for a baton. It's used for either to angle something or it's used as a back scratcher underneath my vest. Um, but that's where as long as you just have one of those things, you could have two or three, but as long as you at
yeah,
least have one, you're still
yeah,
within policy.
yeah. So let me ask you, in jujitsu, do they have any sort of philosophy or sort of others, besides just the physical aspect of it? Because I know, like in both Chinese and Japanese martial arts, philosophy takes a big part of it.
So there is a little bit. My gym isn't the most traditional in that sense.
Mhm.
So we don't have a ton of it specifically in our gym, but there is a lot of kind of just be aware of your surroundings. There are days where we will train blindfolded, where you get a good sense and feeling of your entire body, and it's actually surprising how much easier actually it is to do jujitsu with your eyes closed versus jujitsu with your eyes open, because in everything your eyes can deceive you and looking and feeling at stuff. But if you're just
Mhm.
feeling it and kind of just letting your body take control, that's where some of that mindfulness is. Where you can feel where the person's intending to go or what they're intending to do, versus if you're just looking or your eyes are open, you don't necessarily have that. And then another good thing, I guess, is not necessarily philosophy specific per se, but is to never be in a rush with jujitsu. If you're in control of that person, you should almost every time. Now tournaments are different because tournaments are timed, but if you're in an actual just you're controlling somebody with jujitsu on the street. If you're controlling them, you should almost count to 100, tiring them out to 100 before you try to progress to the next control point or the next move or things of that nature. Before you don't ever feel rushed to kind of, okay, I'm in side mount, but I really want to get into mount so I can do this. Now I have to jump into mount. It's kind of ride them out while they continue to get themselves more exhausted, if that makes sense,
Mm.
and kind of go from there. Count. So one thing that my instructor does say, if you're in a fight, count to 100 and then feel like you need to go to the, now it's not full 100, but kind of just the idea is to not be rushed to go to
Yeah,
that
yeah,
next thing just to get there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know, like in a lot of the kung fu I do as well. We have a thing called chi sao, where
Okay.
it's called sticky hands, and you're sort of going with the flow with the other person. You're in constant contact, and then we have
Okay.
sticky hands where we go blindfolded. And a lot of people get at first they're like, "Oh my God, how am I supposed to do this?" The secret is the sticky hands is easier blindfolded. You actually have an advantage.
It sounds
when
very
you're
similar
blind.
then to doing jujitsu
Yeah.
blindfolded. You lose
Yeah,
that.
because you're not freaked out or focused with your eyes. It's
Yep.
pure feel and sensory
Yep.
awareness. Yeah, yeah. So that sensory awareness does become extremely important. I know in my as I had done martial arts, one of the things in terms of sensory awareness, I told this story with David, is I remember I'd been doing kung fu for about a little over a decade.
Hmm.
And I had a girlfriend prior to my current wife. We were walking down a New York City street, and we were walking down a very dark and lonely and empty New York City. And I grew up in the city. I should have known better. I was being very stupid.
You had to take a
And
shortcut.
yeah, and so I felt somebody following us, and I kind of would look in reflections and saw that there was somebody there. And then I would cross the street. I didn't want to alert her because I didn't want to freak her out.
Right.
And the guy crossed the street, and then I crossed back again, and he crossed back again. So I knew
Yep.
he was following me. And as he was getting a little closer and a little closer, again, I was using sort of reflections in windows and cars to see where he was without, turning around and completely
Right.
seeing him. But when he got within about 20 feet of me, I literally turned around with him and just confronted him, and he just went, whoop, walked
Yep.
completely away.
Yep.
But it increased, and I always say before I started doing martial arts in school, and it was middle school, everybody, middle school is like Mad Max. It's a crazy
Right.
place.
Right.
But I got in fights all the time. Once I started doing martial art, never got in a fight again.
Yep. You definitely get a higher sense of alertness and awareness in just your surroundings in general.
Hmm.
And as law enforcement, and as you observed with that story with that the person following you, a lot of times, not all the time, sometimes people are just bad and they're okay with hurting people, but a lot of times they're trying to commit whatever crime that is with the least amount of resistance possible. And if you turn around, like you turn around and it's like, hey, I see you. Let's go.
Let's go. Yeah, and that was
That
my
guy's like,
attitude. Like, let's do this.
yeah. It's like, no, he's not the guy I didn't want
Yeah.
to tango with him
Yeah, he
today.
wanted to sneak up behind us and smash and
Yep.
grab it.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
so
it's
but
so
has
it's
it helped you?
safe.
Has it helped you as a police officer, like in terms of awareness?
Yes. I think when the heightened awareness in law enforcement, I think is already a bit of a thing anyways, but it helps also with reading body language a little bit more. And they do stress that in law enforcement, but when you train a martial arts twice a week, every week for 4.5 years, you learn how to read that body language a little bit different than if you just talk about it once or twice a year and in a regular department training. And I think that it's not so much the 360 you know awareness that you described from my jujitsu. That's probably more so the law enforcement aspect.
Mhm.
But where I'm sitting, now when I'm just talking to somebody or I'm talking to a group of individuals and one of them wants to either, clench their fist or they're getting into that little bit of a bladed stance or, you know, something like that, you can start reading that and then you can already start moving yourself a little bit to a more beneficial or optimal position, or in my case, call for backup to get more people there to address it or again to deter it. And even at times in my profession, you could even like, don't fight, man. Like, I see what
Mhm.
you're doing. Like,
Mhm.
let's not make this any more worse than it has to be. Like, and
Mhm.
sometimes it works. Sometimes you can't reason with
Mhm.
with people, and it goes the way it goes. But that's where I think it's helped the most. Similar to yours is you're able to read. Even just read the room. You have a plan because again, because of that confidence, you you're not just kind of out there in the middle of that dark street by yourself. You now have several tools in your toolbox to try and protect yourself if need be.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you this. Aside from your law enforcement, aside from being a policeman, and aside from, the gym, how has it helped you in the rest of your life in terms of your family life, your home life, your fitness, dealing with
The
relatives.
the flexibility was a big thing. So I wasn't not flexible, but jujitsu, we like to joke, is basically doing involuntary yoga or folding clothes with people inside them.
Yeah.
So you definitely build a lot more flexibility, and I think that's in any martial arts really, because you're moving your body in various ways that you normally wouldn't move your body, as well as you're forced to stretch out a little bit more than you would if you weren't doing that on a regular basis. On top of that, it's helped with my cardio. I don't think you could run a marathon, and I can't run a marathon, so let me, I guess, preface that. But there isn't a cardio that matches martial arts or fighting. That's a whole
Oh yeah.
different type of breathing.
Oh yeah.
You got to keep your mental
Oh hell
awareness,
yeah.
all that stuff. So that's a whole different type of cardio workout than even running long distance. That's helped a
Stamina
ton.
is, yeah, your stamina is really tested.
Yes. And
Yeah.
then I've gotten bits and pieces. I've started to be able to get my girlfriend to start learning some jujitsu and letting me teach her some jujitsu, as well as my son. Um, I haven't gotten full buy-in either place yet, but I am trying my darndest. Um, for several reasons, because one, I want to make sure that they have some tools in their toolbox too, but also just because I am so passionate in it that it's just something that is fun to try to share with them when they're willing to accept that and kind of do something with them too.
That's nice. So you get to have a kind of a family friendly fight.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah. So what about like mentally?
Mentally, again, I think it goes a lot to the confidence in being able to have like the ability if need be. Um, and then a lot of it is that is one of my true main hobbies. And so it kind of keeps me going outside of my regular day to day, just work, home for dinner, sleep type deal. It gives me something else to do and kind of go about it that way. And like I said, my gym isn't necessarily the most traditional with those senses of
Mhm.
philosophy, but I try to keep myself um, you know, down to earth and kind of sane and centered and calm most of the time. And it does kind of help with that as well. Just we don't do breathing techniques in at jujitsu, but again, it's just kind of thinking of, deep breath in the nose, out the mouth, and kind of get through the hard time and on to the next thing kind of deal.
Yeah, I can imagine being a police officer. The stressfulness must be just off the hook.
There are
So
days where there's definitely days that are worse than others, and again,
yeah,
that's where the jujitsu helps too. If it's that day or the next day that I'm going to jujitsu, it kind of a little bit of stress relief to kind of get it all out.
yeah, yeah. So it does have a really good help for in terms of stress relief then.
Yeah, I'd say
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So anyway, listen, Blake, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing your story, sharing your martial arts with us, sharing your and again continuing to share the double O fight breakdowns, which I think are just, a real treat.
I appreciate
And
you saying that.
yeah, and I appreciate you spending this time.
Yeah, thank you again for having me, and thanks for the invite. I hope this and all the other ones that you're going to do have kind of helped people get that little bit of passion and desire into doing a little bit of martial arts.
Hey, you know, it's not all caviar and cardigans.
That's for sure.
Sometimes you got to mix
Although
it up.
Although, if you wear a cardigan, I could teach you how to get choked out with it or choke somebody else out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing judo now, so we have a little bit of ground fighting in that.
When you've got, even with the
Favorite.
judo, you got the lapel and the sleeve to grab onto to give somebody a good toss or
Yeah,
two.
yeah. Yeah, it's fun. So anyway, thanks a lot, Blake. I really appreciate it. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's Blake from Double O Fight Breakdowns, and I'm Alex from Always Say Yes to Adventure. And you know, find a martial art.
definitely.
Like he always says, find a martial art. Find some place that's close. Find some place that's convenient. and try to incorporate that into your life. You won't be sorry. It's done amazing things for my life, his life, and anybody else who has done it. Okay?
Yep.
Yep.
What he
There we
said.
go. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.